This exhibition is a collaboration between the Fruitmarket Gallery and Modern Art Oxford. The idea for the show was really to bring to Britain, for the first time, these extraordinary collaborative works between Janet Cardiff and George Bures Miller. They're works which prioritise storytelling, prioritise narrative, which create worlds for an audience to enter.
Is there someone there?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes. Who is it? What do you want?
It's me again. Tell me what you see.
It's interesting we're sitting in Dark Pool here because this is really our first official collaboration, and I think we joke about it, that the reason we did it as a collaboration is we've been talking about making this piece for so long that we couldn't remember whose idea it was in the first place. So that's why we decided to do it as a collaboration. It just seemed to grow out of our personal life and our conversations in our studio.
So what are you thinking?
Nothing. Just give me that nightgown.
So you've been gone long?
No,
I left you a note.
I didn't see it.
The Dark Pool is the earliest work in the exhibition, and for me it offers something of an insight into the working practices of Janet and George. You can't help but feel like you've stumbled into their studio. You imagine that this is the kind of space where the imaginations that bring forth these works inhabit. It seems as you wander around that you're seeing little elements that come out later in other works.
We're obviously influenced by, the Babel, Library of Babel by Bures, and the ideas that kind of run through that of the infinite library and books as another world that you can lose yourself in. And I think that's more of what we're trying to do, is we're trying to create works that you can lose yourself in the same way that you can lose yourself in a book, in literature, and perhaps in film as well. I mean, we're also very interested in how film functions and why we're so fascinated by losing ourselves in these kind of immersive situations or media like books. What is it about us that makes us interested in that? And of course we love that, and so we create the situations where you can lose yourself. And I guess all of our work has an idea of presence, or absence of presence. You come into this room and you feel the presence of we imagine these two people working in here, and I guess it's a self-portrait in a certain way, and they were kind of doing scientific experiments, like trying to get dead birds to fly and whatever that pump thing is over there. And I think all the experiments in here were these inexplicable experiments that made no sense. And in a certain way, we were thinking that's what art making is like. It makes no sense. It's a kind of, you get a joy and a sense of something out of it, but it doesn't really make any sense. So that's what this piece is somewhat about.
Opera for a Small Room is a bit like a sound poem. It's a work which relies very heavily on sound. It's a work which performs for an audience. It starts off with an opera and it ends with a rock opera by way of most incredible poetic musings on what it is to have a record collection and what it is to be alone with your records and yourself.
We built that room in our studio, and we got the record players, and we were playing records in the piece, and we had a kind of a fuzzy idea of what would happen. You just start coming up with ideas. Well, why don't we have a thunderstorm come into the space, you know? I mean, it's very Walt Disney in a certain way. I don't know if you've been to Disneyland, but there's this tiki room and they have rain outside, and we were thinking of those kind of ideas, like just the idea that you kind of, we like the idea of immersion, but we also like the idea of taking people outside of the piece and making them think about other things. We live on a train track and it goes by every night about midnight, and so we wanted this train to come thundering through in the same way that it comes by our house and makes the house shake. There's a point where he's walking outside the building. It's the only time where the character, the guy who lives in this shack actually goes outside and he's howling at the moon, but you hear his footsteps going around. And he was we recorded that out walking in our field, and he goes by some cows, and I think it's described something about the cows as well. A lot of, all the kind of dialogue and everything is about what goes on when we're there, basically, wandering around at night, the owls going by, the mice eating everything, you know, and we're gonna have to poison the mice if they start eating the records. So all those kind of bits of dialogue come out of our experience of living in Grindrod, British Columbia. But it just kind of developed that way, you know. We'd be recording script and we'd start ad-libbing, and Janet would say, well, do something about, you know, the mice or whatever, and so it just came.
The Muriel Lake incident relates quite closely to the Paradise Institute, the work which took Venice by storm in 2001. That was a full-scale mini-movie theatre. And the Muriel Lake incident really has much of the impact of the Paradise Institute, but on a very small scale. It's a movie theatre into which we peer wearing headphones. It relies very heavily on this technique of binaural audio recording, which is how much of the work made by Janet Cardiff and George Bures Miller makes its impact. What this kind of recording does is put you in another space. They use sound to transport you from a gallery looking at a box which contains a mini movie theatre into a full-scale cinema.
I mean, the film work that's in the show Muriel Lake Incident is, we're the actors basically in it. So because at the time we don't really like doing huge productions. We've ended up doing a few huge film type productions, but we didn't really think we needed to do that for that. So Janet does the camera when I'm on screen, and I was doing the camera when she's on screen, and so we're got just kind of, it's like play acting. And then we built our own little cinema to put the film of our play acting in. So we're using the technology of Janet's Walks, which is binaural audio, using recording with a microphone in each ear so that it reproduces in a seamless way the way we hear, basically. So you get a sense of the space around you all the time.
If the dark pool offers us a glimpse into what Janet and George's studio might look like, Road Trip gives us a bit of a hint as to what their working relationship might be. It's a piece the form of which is a discussion about what kind of a work might be made with the material they have. In it, we see a selection of slides and we hear Janet and George discussing whether or not a work might be made about them. For me, it's a wonderful circular piece of narrative, a fiction. At the same time, we're not quite sure whether what we're seeing is fact.
I think we should stop. I don't think we should be doing that.
Doing what?
Going back and forth.
You didn't mean to press the rewind button.
I thought the slides were going to be controlled in a way that we don't have any control over them. Like I thought they were going to be the beat of the piece, so they have to be fairly consistent.
Basically, when I build something, I try to work with technology I understand. I come up with solutions that maybe don't make sense to somebody who's more technologically oriented or higher level computer technology. I come up with solutions that make sense to me and that I know I can make happen. And so the technology in the Killing Machine is just really nuts, actually. It's completely crazy. There's so many crazy levels of how we control those robots. It's kind of like them going to the moon in the 60s, because the technology they had was like what you can put in a calculator now. And I think the technology in the Killing Machine is similar. We wanted to do something that was about contemporary, what's going on in our contemporary world right now. And I guess it's a much darker theme than we've ever tackled before. And we went away completely. Neither of our voices are in the piece. It's just music. It's a composition by Frida Abtan, who's a contemporary Canadian composer. It's all about what went on post 9/11, I guess, and how we feel about it. But it's also about, I guess, so it's about Abu Ghraib in a certain way. I mean, we were just, you take an idea and you say you're going to start with that. It's about capital punishment in America, perhaps. It's about all kinds of things. But in the end, then it becomes us as well. And I guess it really started with us reading Kafka as well, Kafka's story in the Penal Colony, which is a fantastic short story. and seems so prescient now in the world we're living in. And he wrote it in 1913 or something like that. So it was kind of fascinating to us how a writer can kind of, who's not even a science fiction writer, can come up with, well, how, I guess people don't change, and that's why we're the same as we were. So the things that he lived through and the time he lived through, it's not much different than right now.
The catalogue to the exhibition is in two parts. The first volume is a straight catalogue to the exhibition. The second volume is a compendium of unrealised projects, thoughts and ideas, sketches, jottings, written down by both artists in notebooks over the duration of the time covered by the exhibition from, I think, from around 1991 to now. When we were doing the research for the exhibition catalogue, going through notebooks, Janet and George both going through their notebooks page by page, selecting projects that would work well in the book, we came across a sketch for the House of Books. In fact, it was the first sketch, first idea that Janet pulled out for the book, and she first of all said, I think this would make a good title for the exhibition. And then in the course of doing the research, of looking at the sketches, we kept coming back to this sketch, and Janet said, you know, it would be really nice to make the piece for the exhibition to realise this particular work. So The House of Books Has No Windows is the realisation of that. It started from the sketch in the notebook, I think from 1996, and it was realised this year. It's a library turned inside out. It's a collection of books turned in on themselves, made into a little house with no windows that you can go inside. When you're inside, the pages of the books are turned towards you. There's no light and there's no sound. It's a work which cuts you off from the outside world, much as a book does, and much as the work of Janet Cardiff and George Bures does. For me, it's both an introduction to the exhibition and an encapsulation of it. It says a lot that there is to say about the power of narrative and the power of storytelling. It has no windows and it has no sound, and it's odd in Janet and George's work for that it has no sound. But I think it speaks, it's in its soundlessness, it speaks incredibly eloquently of what it is they're trying to get at.
Okay, so this is one of our binaural heads. We have two of them. This is the more professional one. But what it is it's a dummy head. It weighs about the same amount as a real head, and it has microphones.
Unfortunately, which is very heavy, actually.
Microphones in the ears. So when this is connected to the camera,
I'll just take Fritz's head off. There's microphones here, and then these beautiful rubberized ears. Because our head basically acts as a filter from one ear to the other, so that what hits this ear has to filter around and bounce off whatever, and bounce off whatever wall.
one of the things that people don't realize is how much they know a space by the acoustic surroundings. That if you closed your eyes and you were given a recording of say 10 spaces, you could probably guess what types of spaces those are. Because if you recorded this room with this head and you played it back to someone, they would know they were in a big space. Whereas if you recorded in a closet, then you also know you're in a closet. And so we use this ability of everyone to sort of understand space through their hearing.
Are you rolling?
Rolling.
This is take 2, match striking.
That's the worst pretend cigarette.
Don't laugh while I'm doing sound effects.
Okay, sorry. Just do it. Just.
Okay, so are you rolling? But you wanted a longer pause somewhere at the bench, is that right? Before you get
just
up?
give it a bit more space.
Yeah, I need you to be able to listen to this.
It's just going to be short. Here, give me the headphones.
Okay.
Shirley we built ourselves, and for some reason Shirley, the microphones we use in Shirley, they respond better to Janet's voice, and it gives it a different EQ on the voice, and so we prefer to use it, and she's also lighter for walking around.
Yeah, because it gets pretty heavy if you have to walk around talking to a head like this all the time. It gets quite heavy. There's a fly. Kill that fly.
Great. Knows I want to kill it.
I didn't know then that Boone was a real man once, that killed real Indians. I didn't know that my government was stealing Native children out of their homes to force them into schools. I didn't know then who Martin Luther King or JFK were, or why there was a war in Vietnam. I didn't know a lot of things then. I don't want to know a lot of things now.